Hey everybody, it's Darin Francis with Signals in Higher Ed and Harbinger Lane. Uh, Excited to have as a guest today Dr. Kelvin Bentley. Kelvin, welcome to the conversation, to the show.
Oh, thank you so much, Darren, for inviting me on. I've really enjoyed listening to your podcast in the past, and you were on, one of the podcasts I helped to co-facilitate, and it's just great to have the opportunity to talk with you.
We had a blast, yeah, and I wanted to continue the conversation. I thought, why not do it on our our channel? So hey, listen, there's a lot. I mean, I feel like everybody knows Calvin Bentley, but for those that don't, in our circle, um, you have an interesting background. You've been a faculty member, an administrator, a consultant. You've worked in the 2-year space and the 4-year space, college and university both. Now you've got this really interesting role at NASH, um, and I want to kind of understand it a little bit better. But I'm just curious. I mean, you've been at sort of the forefront of academic innovation for years. Wondering what you're seeing out there. What's capturing your attention? What do you think is interesting or happening in the market today that we should be thinking about?
Yeah, no, that's a great question. Yeah, I feel like there's so, to your point, there's so many things. It's kind of like that movie. What is it? Everything all at once,
Oh yeah.
about like I feel like a lot of things are coming at us, some of which definitely presents new opportunities. I mean, obviously, the hot guy or hot girl at school right now is AI, anything related to AI. But it's definitely a love-hate relationship, right? Because I think, at least within higher ed, right, I think, there are grumblings, concerns, right, about plagiarism and things like that. Will students use it to the point where they're not actively, using critical thinking skills, analytical skills? They're just deferring to AI. So I think that's definitely that'll be something that we'll have to definitely kind of continue to figure out and do pilots around, and really try to also work with these companies that, of course, want our token dollars, and hopefully collectively we can find ways, maybe through intermediaries, member-based organizations in higher ed like NASH and others, to put pressure on some of these AI companies to, to deliver in ways that protect the integrity of the learning. But I think, kind of within that, which is still getting attention, interesting enough, politically, I think, is, again, anything related to workforce development. And there's lots of things to unpack with that, because I think, when you look at the news, for example, you hear a lot more about talk around like apprenticeships, WIOA, leveraging Perkins dollars to support like more short form, short order training, which is, the new short term Pell, work based Pell, just came out, right? It's now available to institutions to leverage, and so I think there's lots of talk there. Apprenticeships, for sure, especially around those critical, areas that have critical workforce shortages, like, again, all the usual suspects, right? Education, nursing, and then also just other various positions in healthcare outside of nursing that still need a lot of support, and definitely many more people than we can. Many more people needed to fill a lot of those gaps in terms of staffing. Within the workforce development piece, one thing that's maybe not bringing, not getting attention maybe as often, because I think you hear more about the pilots, but you don't always hear about institutions thinking about this strategically, is how can we actually provide students multiple opportunities when they are with us to get work experience, right? And of course, there's lots of different ways to do that. Students, of course, are going on their own to pay for the ever increasing uh, you know, um, increases in tuition. So you got to have a job these days just to have some money in your pocket, either to help pay for your bills or indirect, pay for other things like gas, which of course is going up for various reasons. With career connected learning, experiential learning, work-based learning. How can we provide more work experience to our students without telling them just go get an internship? Because as we know, as you've covered, great research by Kristen Fox and her team at the Business Higher Education Forum has shown that basically the demand is outstripped the supply. Like there's just not enough internships to go around. And so could we actually, in addition to an internship, can we provide other work-based experience or work integrated learning opportunities so students can do a lot of different things with that? They can, of course, it can further their own career exploration and kind of help them realize, yeah, these are the things I'm good at, but these are some things maybe I either need to work on or maybe I need to think about, taking another career path. And I don't know if a lot of schools are doing enough of that just yet. I think we're trying to get there indirectly. We're doing pilots, of course, with companies like Ripen, Parker Dewey, virtual internships, Podium Learning, some of the companies that you've covered in a previous podcast, which was a great interview to hear their perspectives about, how do we do that work. I would also say learning employment records. So the workforce development is such a big area. So LERs I think are coming in, and so people, of course, I think still questioning, what are they? It's I think just an easier way digitally to to document all of the skills and knowledge that we've acquired, regardless of where they were acquired or how. And so it's a digital wallet, but it might also include various other digital badges outside of that wallet, or maybe you have multiple digital wallets that have lots of information about you and the history of your learning. And so I think there's some energy around there because LERs have come up with some of the grants that are coming out of the Department of Labor, Commerce, I think maybe even education as well. And so talent marketplaces are coming up. And so how can we better prepare colleges and universities, not necessarily to abandon how they've done certain things with teaching and learning, but how can we help learners tell a better story about what they know and what they can do, in part because they went to college. And for those who didn't, STARS, for example, right? Opportunity at Work talks about, folks who have attained skills through alternative routes, right? Which I think is a great way to think about that. And so I think a lot of their work aligns with some of the LER work as well, because we're trying to really get down to skills and competencies and helping employers realize that should be the focus and not the fact that you went to college and graduated from college in 1992, like I did from Wayne State University. Go Michigan, because I know you're a Michigan fan. 313 for life. That was my original area code with M&M. Yeah. But so I think all of those things, and I think, there are other things too that continue to kind of nag at higher ed, like credit mobility, right? Anything related to credit for prior learning. And we're still, I think, stuck in a rut in terms of making the case there. But those are just some initial things. And maybe as we continue to chat a bit, I'll think of a few others that maybe I didn't mention.
It's a great list. And it's, I agree. I feel like, the reason I keep doing this podcast, to be honest, is because all the things that you mentioned are live and open and still unresolved. We're figuring this out exponentially faster than we could have in the past. It's really interesting. I mean, we as much as higher ed gets a bad rap for slowness or bureaucracy, to my eye, as I continue to have these conversations, there is rapid change occurring, and we'd like it to go faster, or but there's a lot of reasons for the way things go, and I think actually a lot of the undercurrents that you mentioned, it all points to. I was talking to somebody earlier this week, and we're talking about, hey, there was this period of time where we focused so much on just getting the enrollments up, and then we were like, retention. Retention's our thing. Well, then it's completion. And really now, like everything's pointing towards post completion success and what's the ROI. Um, and I do think that there's some really great innovation when you bring in the LER and the credit for prior learning elements into the equation. Um, Here, they fit, and they're
Yeah,
really important to sort out.
yeah,
Um, in this mix. Well, let's jump a little bit into your world today and in the micro credential side. And I'm curious of the things that you spoke about. I imagine that that you hit on several of these. You certainly hit on AI. You hit on workforce development. I'm wondering if some of this even aligns to the workforce Pell. But talk a little bit about the role you've carved out at NASH. It sounds to me like when I hear community of practice on micro credentials, I feel like that's a space where you're given some latitude to innovate and collaborate with others. So maybe talk a little bit about what the role is today and how did it come to be, and then we'll talk about what you're doing.
yeah. No, thanks for that question. Yeah, I've definitely to talk about this. I do have to go back a bit. Luckily, I was very fortunate after I left WGU Labs. I was a consultant there to work on a grant funded project through the Strada Education Foundation. So this was back in 2023 when I joined the University of Texas system, which had received a $1.5 million grant from Strata to actually like continue to like grow and scale access to industry credentials, with the hope being that the combination of a degree plus an industry credential, let's say in data analytics or cybersecurity, these up and coming areas of importance, that combo platter would hopefully help. We would actually maybe over time see that our graduates who did both of those things, were better off. Especially given, as we were just talking about, how things are moving so fast. New technologies need to be learned, or because they're being integrated into so many different things, different jobs and things like that. So I had the pleasure of really creating a community of practice there, which was really we leveraged grant funds to incentivize campuses within the University of Texas system. So initially, we worked with, nine, university campuses, yeah, like UT San Antonio, UT Permian Basin, UT Rio Grande, the flagship, obviously, UT Austin. And what we did is we provided them access to industry credentials, initially from Google, because the UT system was a part of the Grow with Google program, which supports sharing a limit initially 500 licenses per campus on the Coursera platform to actually, give learners access to the Google career certs and specializations. So that's kind of where the UT system started to do some pilots, and then Strata gave the system a bit more money to do a bit more growth in that. And interesting enough, the system decided to pay for a full license to Coursera. So the work then changed. This was called the Texas Credentials for the Future Initiative. So the work changed such that now students had access to micro-credentials from IBM and Meta, CVS Health, and other providers. So that idea or that experience of a community of practice where having meetings online and also face to face to share insights, best practices, versus also things that didn't go so well in terms of finding ways to integrate micro-credential content in courses through a faculty champion or co-curricularly, so that students didn't necessarily have to take my psychology course, right, to get access to an industry credential from Google and data analytics. So we wanted to work with campuses interested in testing out both of those models. It was a great experience, which then prepared me to initially be a part-time director of a brand new community of practice that started in the fall of 2024 at NASH. So now, sorry to take the long way around to answer your question, but at NASH, the National Association of Higher Ed Systems, they initially received some money from Google to, again, create this community of practice. And this was, I would be remiss if I forgot to mention, my current supervisor at NASH, Jessica Todman. This was her idea, and working together also with a guy named Rob Magliaro, who maybe many people in your audience might know. He used to be the head of education and workforce partnerships at Google. But Jessica and Rob were talking about like how, can we do this type of community of practice? But then I talked about, because I knew Rob because of my work at UT System, I said, yeah, like I would love to, be able just to provide part-time support as you're kind of getting this up and running. I could also reach out to colleagues in the UT System to be guest speakers and webinars. And so because Jessica and Rob were open to me joining in a part-time capacity, and my supervisor, Archie Holmes, who's the head of academics for the UT System, gave the green light because UT System is a NASH member, it all kind of worked out. So I leveraged some of the learnings from the UT System in my full-time role at the time, to be the part-time director of this new community of practice made up of initially 11 systems like SUNY, CUNY, California State system, University System of Maryland, University of Hawaii system. So we had a lot of interesting diversity there. Maine Community College system. So so it was a great way for me to see how a community of practice model that we leveraged in Texas could work with not just individual campuses, but whole systems, or at least system leads from the 11 systems. And that work really moved forward really well. And luckily, Jessica was able to write a grant, with support also from Rob and others. And, we were able to get a Google.org grant to grow the community of practice from 11 systems to 17. And we were able to pick up some interesting systems like the Southern Illinois University system, and several others. Montana State. I had never had an opportunity to work with schools in Montana, so that's been really great. And so now the community of practice is bigger. We now have crossed over 25,000 learners on the Coursera platform, where a large majority of those learners are students. But we also have, alumni. We have faculty who are trying to upskill around AI, for example, because, Google, one of Google's career certs is in, guess what, artificial intelligence and how to use it and practice vibe coding and all those things. And so, so the community of practice is bigger. We're also experimenting with pairing a small pilot, giving up to 200 students a way to take their micro-credential and apply it in a work-based learning opportunity. And so we're doing that as a part of this work. And it's been great. I've learned so much talking with folks, again, from various systems across the United States and Hawaii, including Hawaii. And so it's great. And it's also a great opportunity for us in terms of our final report out, the data, because lots of schools belong to the Grow with Google program one-to-one. But I would say since 2018, when that program started, there hasn't always been opportunities like this to have a huge community of practice where there's ideas being shared. Also, we're going to look at some of our data across systems to learn, like, how many psych majors are pursuing a micro-credential in X, right? And how many of them are men versus women? How many of them are demographically different in terms of race and ethnicity? And we'll be able to summarize that such that most likely a year from now, we'll have a final report. So, and of course, I can go on and on about the work, but it's great because now we have a way to impact, hopefully, career readiness, not just within, again, one system within one part of the United States, i.e., Texas. Now we have a way to do it across the United States. And not every campus in the system is participating in our community of practice in terms of, coming to meetings and then distributing those free licenses I mentioned that you get for being in the program. But my hope is that as those participating campuses in those systems show their work, that will motivate other campuses to do the same.
I'm usually skeptical of a large corporate involved in the education space, but I have to kind of do hats off to Google because they seem to come into education um, alongside strategic partners. And you can juxtapose the way that they've worked with NASH and with you and the work that you're doing versus the way some other orgs are just sort of dropping their tech on everybody and hoping that they create a bunch of users regardless of any kind of academic strategy or alliance to solving problems in higher ed. And so I'm interested in how this works. It is interesting that inside of state systems, it's often herding cats. Like
Yeah.
trying to get two institutions in the same state to do the same thing or align on some level is often really a big challenge. I'm curious, what did you learn in Texas about your convening ability and how to get people to the table that helped you kind of grow this more nationally?
Yeah, I mean, I think just going into the work, because it is challenging, right? It's like herding cats, and sometimes it's like herding cats with kittens, right? It's because everyone is busy, and there's not always like a direct incentive that you can point to that benefits, let's say, a faculty member to actually like give them the opportunity to do this work and the time to do it. And so, definitely having some incentives through grant funds helped a bit because each campus that participated in the Texas community of practice for Texas Credentials for the Future in support of broadly educated, specifically skilled. That was our tag. And I would just credit the system for just identifying like campus leads who were very strong, like people who could network well within their campus environments to identify faculty and staff to help them actually like promote the micro-credentials. I think another thing that also helped was a student advisory group that was really excited about this. And so they helped to champion this work along with our faculty champions and administrators. It also helped that the chancellor at the time, J.B. Milligan, who is now the chancellor or the head of the University of California system, this type of approach grew a lot from his thinking. And so, Lydia Riley within the Office of Academic Affairs at the time and Chief of Staff of Academic Affairs, and then Archie Holmes were able to kind of work together to, make the community of practice viable, especially once the Strata funding came in. But definitely having incentives, definitely working with folks to find time to kind of share those ideas. I think people really appreciated the networking opportunities because since they were all starting in a common place in terms of like, how do we do this? And, they had similar questions and they were very motivated to like come to meetings to kind of like, listen in to find out what's working for people, what's not working. Coursera, I think also at the time, and as well as Google, were very good thought partners as well and provided resources. So that's a long way around to say that there was lots of like support from the top, but then also at the level of like directors and other administrators, VPs on the campuses that really helped. And that approach, I think, works at NASH as well. Like picking system leads, like each system picked folks that are innovative, very like open-minded, willing to jump on a Teams or Zoom call to talk about the minutia of doing this work, because it can be a bit challenging, because you don't, there's not really like a detailed playbook that I've been able to find that really explains soup to nuts how to do this really well. And so yeah, so I think those are the things that definitely helped: incentives and just people hungry for knowledge about how to do it, and how to do it well.
Micro-credentials feel benign in terms of threats, but I'm wondering, like, if I'm on the faculty senate at XYZ University, do I have uh, concerns that need to be overcome in order to get behind this, or do you find resistance in the faculty senate to launching any of this?
Yeah, well, I think another thing that helped, specific, especially Texas at the time, that even though there was um, approval at the highest level to do this type of work, um, no one was told you have to do it. So I think that helped a lot, and we worked with the willing, and provided some incentives to help the faculty get on board and try it. So I think doing that really allowed Texas to move fairly, quickly in terms of like getting the word out and getting faculty excited about doing the work. Um, and but I think, at least for us, we were never saying that we're going to put ourselves out of business. Like, our goal is to put ourselves out of business. Maybe we'll have a football game now and then, but we're going to shut down all the UT campuses and replace them with micro credentials. Like, that was never right. Like, that's not what we're doing. That it is like an additional thing, right? Like, broadly educated, specifically skilled, right? You're going to get a great education from any one of our campuses. But we also realize, as we mentioned earlier, the world is moving fast. I mean, faster and faster, not just because of AI, but because of so many other things, right? The reckoning that higher ed is having around rising tuition, and again, a very uncertain world of work, not just because of AI disruption or perceived disruption, but also the fact that people are cutting back in certain industries, right? While interesting enough, we have problems filling certain jobs, right? Like nursing, teachers, and so on. So I think, the approach was, it's 1+1, right? It's additive, not as a replacement. And so I never had to deal with the issues that I think I had to deal with years ago when I was a director of online learning at a couple of different places, where there was like, oh my God, like online learning is gonna, like, you're gonna basically hire a bunch of adjuncts and you're gonna fire me. And then over time, right, like full-time faculty realized, well, crap, I could teach online. I'll do it. Right. And so they realized that there was a benefit there, that online learning in and of itself is not, it's like the force. It's not, it's not good or evil, or maybe I don't know, maybe some people still think it is evil, but I think, the more that you can show examples of other faculty too doing the work, then it's harder for faculty to poo-poo it, right? Because they're like, oh, I know this person. He's a great teacher, or she's a great teacher. So maybe I should talk with them more about their experience before I completely shut this down as something that I'm not interested in doing.
The micro credentials themselves. So I don't know enough about sort of the catalog and where a lot of, I get how this sort of fills the niche of need from an industry uh, perspective, right? But like, is this a fairly wide ranging set of credentials that hit a lot of different areas now? Is it primarily focused in sort of technology and AI and that kind of thing? Talk about what is included. I see Google partnership. I assume it's all.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's mostly, I would say, yeah, it's definitely, the micro credentials definitely try to upskill people around certain technologies, and business processes, right? Like how, so it's AI, it's cybersecurity, it's, but then also Google has, other specializations and certs on like people management and things like that. So business ops, technology. But as we know, the Coursera catalog is quite large, right? So you could there's definitely other topic areas that universities have put together as a bundle to offer on the micro-credential side. But the ones that I'm more familiar with are definitely business ops and tech. And the idea is, at least, I think in Texas and then also within the NASH community of practice on micro-credentials, we realize that sometimes it's really kind of like completing a micro-credential course gives you insights in terms of, because maybe you're not going to necessarily be like a cybersecurity expert, but maybe there are elements of the knowledge that might further your own understanding on the topic for your own professional development. Maybe like for data analytics cert, maybe completing that could actually make you better in terms of leveraging data in ways to improve business processes and workflows. So that's the approach, I think, in terms of thinking about completing the micro-credential to solve gaps, either in yourself professionally, because you want to just be well, more broadly educated, right, in terms of what you know versus what you don't know. And then so I think that's the interesting thing with micro-credentials, that you could take aspects of that experience and apply it to your personal life, to job responsibilities, and so forth and so on.
I wonder if we kind of go full circle to the beginning of the conversation, um, what we can learn from how we widely apply and adopt something like micro credentials for all sorts of good reasons that you've really gone over. But what we can learn about that, or from that, that will help us do more to embed the experience into the curriculum. Um, like it seems to me, one of the things that micro credentials does is I'm studying along, I'm doing great in my psychology degree or whatever, and now I have this opportunity to upskill in this really relevant way that'll help me in my job, right? That's really that's great. There's no reason to add that into the degree. That's just sort of it's a value add to my education, um, and it's just in time, right? It's like it's new, it's fresh, it's sort of evergreen content that is being created, that is kind of Google backed or industry backed, right? Um, how do we get how do we get that kind of innovation and that kind of thinking that allows us to bring the latest and greatest, most relevant content into a credential? How do we do that, you know, long term, turning our degrees into something more pliable, more career ready? I don't know. Do you have any thoughts on ways that we can apply the learning that you've had with micro credential, with the success of this program,
Yeah.
and in how institutions can do kind of really curriculum redesign, um, iteratively, more quickly as well?
Yeah, no, that's a great question. I mean, I think that's kind of where many, campuses, many colleges and universities are trying to kind of think through that very carefully. How can we integrate different industry credentials, either co-curricularly or within certain courses, and then of course track the outcomes of that, right? Like, because again, I think the interesting with micro credentials is that it does, because it is a smaller bundle than trying to unpack the entire degree. It Then the information about that experience is at times more top of mind to help that learner tell that story about, oh, these are some of the newer skills that I've developed. And in some cases, with some of the coursework on Coursera, there are things like guided projects. So a way for you to actually like demonstrate that you actually were able to apply what you learned and maybe that becomes a part of your e-portfolio. Sorry to take us back in time to e-portfolios, but I feel like it's back, kind of we're going back to them to hopefully, make the case. So, but I think it's my hope is that our final report will motivate some folks to at least, pilot the use of the micro-credentials, do some early surveys to ask whether or not working on micro-credentials maybe helps with like retention, because you're able to like see if you're really into that learning experience. It's almost like Duolingo. You're like hungry for the next short course, which hopefully is branded in a way that will help you get recognized, as you start applying for jobs later. Not to say that micro-credentials are the end all be all, because again, as I mentioned before, I think it's also a part of the bigger bundle, which includes the traditional degree, but then also work-based or work integrated learning opportunities along the way. All of that matters. I would also say that I think in terms of the work, we still have a bit to do. I think, Texas is doing some of this work right now, like gradually looking at longitudinally, what are the outcomes of someone that gets a degree and pursues a micro-credential? What are the job outcomes for maybe those students who stopped out, but they were able to earn a micro-credential? I think there's some opportunities for institutions to almost like start thinking about ways to not necessarily unbundle the degree, but maybe do a better job of defining those skills and competencies. Maybe look at other means to like competency-based education. But again, that's also another thing that requires time and effort. But I think it's like learners still need to have a better sense of, like, on a micro level, like, what do I know? What can I do? What are examples of that? So that it's a much easier story. Like if you start them with helping them with their storytelling skills much earlier on, by the time they graduate, they will know, and they will be able to reflect back on the degree, the micro-credentials, the work-based, work integrated learning experiences, and tell that story that maybe their counterpart 10 years ago could not do, because all they were given is a simple paper transcript. Like, for example, if you saw mine from Wayne State University, you would need a magnifying glass because the font size is like on a 2 or a 3, and
Right.
and it's just really hard to read. But I think we need to leverage the micro-credential work, but and share best practices about, like, finding ways to integrate it, maybe for extra credit, or for a choose your own adventure, where maybe you have a couple different options to earn 30 points, and so maybe doing it, earning those points by completing a micro-credential would help, or a special topics course, right? That could be a very easy way to where you take that as an elective, and that's the full focus of your attention is earning that micro-credential, let's say, getting that professional cert in AI, in addition to your degree, which would be, I think, a great pairing, right? Because then you don't have to struggle as a faculty member, like, oh, how am I going to use this information in my class? Like, give the student an opportunity, maybe even outside of a class, to take a course like that. But I think it's a full court press. All of these things matter, versus just focusing on co-curricular. We have to also work with those faculty who are interested in pedagogically redesigning, or even just not even a full redesign, but just seeing where the content of a micro-credential course makes sense given the learning objectives of their course.
Yes. Yeah. No, I think that makes sense. And it feels to me like micro-credentials are another space. You're right, among several, and you give good examples, but it's just another area where we're moving faster than the market, and it's good. And I'm looking forward to. You said when is the report going to be complete? Is that next year?
Yeah, definitely by next year. My hope is around June of next year, and so you and others can definitely hold me accountable. And if we haven't made a press release at that point about it, just let me reach out to me, and I can give you the update. But our hope is that, yeah, our report will again, summarize again some of those effective practices about how to do the work, and then also maybe make suggestions too about like analyses, right? Because that's the interesting thing, like because these industry credentials have big names behind them, right? Like people know Google, people know Meta, they know various other brand names like that. But then we still have to like do the due diligence, right? We have to connect the dots between the earners of an industry credential and then what happens next. Martin Stigman from Burning Glass Institute, right, is I think they've done some research initially on this, which is interesting. But my hope is that we could do higher ed can do similar work to really start again connecting those dots for young alumni, especially. Are these micro-credential skills, do they have any value? And maybe it's also interviewing their employers. Like, are you even tracking this? Like, do you care that someone has a Google cert in data analytics? Are you using it as a part of your hiring process? And if not, why not? Right. And so I think there's still there's much more that that we need to dig into with micro-credentials to hopefully make the case that investing in no-cost access for the learner is worth an institution's investment.
Right. Yeah. Well, I mean, honestly, your involvement in this gives me great comfort that we're looking at this the right way. I think
thank you.
you've
Again,
been...
it takes not a village but villagers. So again, I'm very blessed to work with people who are willing to work with me, because it's no fun if you're in a sandbox by yourself trying to do this, right? Like I get I get so motivated from other folks like you and others who are innovative and again open to trying things, because that's how we learn, and that's how we can hopefully help higher ed evolve in a small way, given our work in our lifetime. I'll start with that, and hopefully we can do more than just help higher ed change in small ways.
Yeah, no, absolutely. I think it makes sense. Well, Kelvin, where can our listeners follow your work and learn more about NASH and the micro-credential community of practice?
Yeah, we have information under the partnerships section of the NASH. So it's nash.edu. So definitely check out our website to learn more about the partnership and also other work that we are doing. And then for people who are interested in following me, it's pretty easy to find me on LinkedIn. There are a couple of different Kelvin Bentleys, but feel free to connect with me anytime through there. And then obviously, if we need a further chat, we could always schedule time to do that. But LinkedIn is usually one of the best ways to get a hold of me.
Perfect. Well, I hope they do. And Kelvin, it's great talking. We'll have to have this conversation again, at least in a year from now, if not sooner.
Yeah, thanks again. And looking forward to that upcoming conversation.
Awesome.